That morning, your father drank a bowl of lamb stew. Then he died. The royal physician called it a heart attack. The official court record wrote, God's will. But you notice one detail: the eunuch, whose entire job was tasting the Sultan's food before every meal, a man who had served your father for 23 years, quietly disappeared from the palace within 2 hours of the announcement. Nobody went looking for him. Nobody brought it up. In Topkapi Palace, there are certain questions you learn not to ask. You're 17 years old. You just finished memorizing a passage of Persian poetry when the servant burst through your door. You're still holding the book. You stood there, frozen, for maybe 3 full seconds. 3 seconds later, you put the book down, because you suddenly understand, from this moment forward, your life is on a clock. Your Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa, is already waiting outside your door. He served your father for 30 years, survived 3 palace coups, and lived through 2 succession wars. His eyes carry something you have never seen on another person's face, an absolute, bone-deep calm. The kind of calm that makes your skin crawl. He steps inside, shuts the door, drops his voice to barely a whisper, and says 7 words. The couriers are already on the road. You blink, then it hits you. Not your couriers, someone else's. Let me explain exactly why those 7 words should terrify you. The Ottoman court's intelligence network was one of the most sophisticated pieces of infrastructure in the entire empire. Every provincial governor's mansion had at least one informant reporting directly back to Istanbul. Every palace servant was potentially on someone else's payroll. Information inside these walls moved faster and in more directions than you could ever fully track. You have 19 brothers. The oldest is named Mustafa, 3 years younger than you, stationed as governor of Konya, deep in central Anatolia. He's sharp, charismatic, beloved by the locals, and commands a personal cavalry of 2,800 men, a provincial garrison of 1,500 soldiers, and 3 military commanders whose loyalty belongs to him personally. Kara Mustafa slides a document across the table, an intercepted letter, written by some low-level palace bureaucrat you barely recognize, addressed to the head steward at the Konya governor's estate. 1 line. The flower has bloomed, awaiting your harvest. That's the code. News of your father's death had already been sent out before you even knew he was gone. The ground feels like it shifts slightly under your feet. Kara Mustafa keeps going. Konya is 3 days' hard ride from Istanbul. If the prince mobilizes immediately, his cavalry vanguard could reach the city walls in 14 days. Your window, Your Majesty, is no more than 48 hours. In those 48 hours, you have to complete your coronation, lock down the Janissary Corps' loyalty, seal Istanbul's 4 city gates, and deal with every single one of your brothers. This isn't a to-do list. This is a race to stay alive. But that's still not the worst part. The worst part is what Kara Mustafa says next. He takes the document back, looks you dead in the eye, and says, I need to know if Your Majesty is ready. He's not asking if you're emotionally prepared. He's sizing you up, deciding whether this 17-year-old in front of him is worth betting his career on. You know where this law came from. Your teachers told you. In an almost clinical tone, they walked you through the succession wars of 1402 to 1413. 4 princes fighting over the empire's carcass for 11 straight years. The empire lost a third of its territory. Hundreds of thousands died. Hungary, Venice, and Persia lined up along the borders like vultures circling a wounded animal. Then Mehmed II took the throne, and he made a decision no one else had been ruthless enough to make. Think of the Ottoman Empire as a massive global conglomerate. The founder dies, leaves 5 adult sons, each running their own subsidiary, their own cash flow, their own private security force. 0 succession agreement. You already know how that story ends. Mehmed II's solution: eliminate every potential shareholder dispute at the source. Permanently. The Ottoman Law Code, the canon name Article 1, signed off by the empire's highest Islamic legal scholars. Whosoever among my descendants accedes to the Sultanate may lawfully put his brothers to death to preserve the order of the world. Legal. Officially sanctioned. Unquestionable. You're now sitting at the royal desk, a blank imperial decree in front of you, ink freshly ground. Kara Mustafa stands to your left. The head of the Dilsiz stands to your right. The Dilsiz, Turkish for the voiceless ones, hand-picked as children, specially trained, never named, never entered into any official record. Some reportedly had their tongues removed voluntarily, trading their voice for a guaranteed position inside the palace. Easily the most disturbing job qualification in recorded human history. You pick up the pen. The tip hovers about an inch above the parchment and stops. The silence stretches for close to a full minute. Nobody speaks, nobody moves. Kara Mustafa's face doesn't change. The head Dilsiz stares at the carpet. You think about Mustafa. Last time he visited Istanbul, the two of you played chess in the garden. He lost, laughed, said he'd get his revenge next time. You think about when you were kids, the two of you tumbling off your horses into the mud, laughing until neither of you could breathe. Then you think about that letter. The flower has bloomed, awaiting your harvest. You put pen to paper, but this is not the hardest order you'll ever sign. You think signing the order means the worst is behind you. You have absolutely no idea. The coronation ceremony has barely wrapped up. Court ministers are still filing out from their loyalty bows when your left-hand attendant leans in and murmurs, barely audible. The Aga of the First Janissary Corps is requesting an audience. He's waiting in the side chamber. The Janissaries. The Empire's elite standing army. Boys pulled from Balkan Christian families, raised from early childhood into professional soldiers, sworn to serve the Sultan in theory. In practice, they function more like the most heavily armed labour union in world history. Battle-hardened, politically savvy, and very aware of exactly how much leverage they held. You already know what he's about to say. Every incoming sultan, without a single exception, was expected to pay a coronation bonus to the Janissary Corps. It's not tradition, it's ironclad expectation. And you already know the Treasury's condition. Your father ran 2 expensive wars in his final 3 years. The treasurer was in tears about the deficit just last week. The Aga enters, kneels, and in the most deferential tone imaginable, quotes you a number. You do the mental math. Roughly 4 months of the empire's total tax revenue. The treasurer next to you has gone pale. 3 options, none of them clean. Pay in full. Your treasury craters on day 1, and you've just proven you can be squeezed. From this point forward, every time the army gets restless, this is how they'll come at you. Refuse. In 1622, Sultan Osman II tried to strip the Janissaries of their power. They dragged him off the throne and killed him. With a bowstring, the same method used for royal executions. You've been Sultan for 3 hours, but their personal loyalty to you is still an unknown. Negotiate, push back, compress the number, buy time. But that requires them to believe you actually have teeth. You're 17. This is your first hour in this chair. Can you make him believe that? You straighten your back, pull in one slow breath. Then you speak in a register you have never used in your entire life. Not a question, not a request, just a statement. There will be a gift, but the amount is mine to decide, and the timing is mine to set. The core defends this empire. That is your duty, not a bargaining chip. You watch the Aga's eyes. They shift, just slightly. Then he bows his head, as you command. He leaves. You wait until the door fully closes. Then you notice your palms are completely soaked. But the most dangerous moment still hasn't arrived. Kara Mustafa did too much for you. He intercepted the letter. He coordinated the Dilses. He blocked 3 hostile senior ministers during the coronation. He used 30 years of accumulated political connections to flatten every obstacle in your path during the most critical 48 hours of your life. Without him, you probably don't survive day 1. On day 3, he comes to report the results from Konya. Then, almost as a casual afterthought, he suggests that his nephew Selim should be appointed commander of Istanbul's city defense. City defense commander, 4 city gates, 3,000 soldiers, the capital's literal lifeline. You look at him without changing your expression. Then something clicks. Over the past 72 hours, this man has accumulated everything on you. He knows every detail of that intercepted letter. He knows the complete execution chain. He knows about your 1 full minute of hesitation, pen hovering over parchment. He probably clocked your palms, sweating in front of the Janissary Aga. He is now holding receipts on all of it. This is the Ottoman court's darkest operating principle. The man who helps you kill becomes your single greatest liability, because he knows exactly what you owe him, and he knows there are things you cannot afford to refuse. You smile slightly. Give me 3 days to consider. 3 days later, you quietly summon a separate official and open a confidential financial audit on Kara Mustafa. Simultaneously, through your personal eunuch, you let it filter back. The city defense appointment may take considerably longer to finalize. This is your first real move. Not a reaction, a play. Kara Mustafa receives the signal. The invisible wire between the two of you goes taut. You had been waiting for this message, and dreading it in equal measure. The courier arrives exhausted, drops to his knees, pulls a sealed copper tube from inside his coat. 1 thin sheet of paper inside. Mustafa had found out before the executioners arrived. Someone had leaked it, but he didn't run. He didn't call up his troops. He did something you never saw coming. He dismissed his personal guard, stripped off his governor's robes, changed into plain commoner's clothes, and walked on foot into the largest mosque in Konya. In front of the entire congregation, he sat down on the floor of the prayer hall and announced. He was giving up everything. He only wanted to live. You stare at that piece of paper for a long time. It's a brilliant move. By surrendering publicly in sacred space in front of witnesses, he turned his own execution into a public moral crisis. A mosque is holy ground. Any action taken there echoes across the entire Islamic world. Leave him alive, and you're carrying a living, legitimate bloodline rival for the rest of your reign. Execute him in that mosque, and you've handed your enemies the most devastating propaganda weapon they could dream of. Your brother, it turns out, is nobody's fool. You summon Kara Mustafa. He hears the full report, pauses, then speaks in that same flat, weatherproof calm. Surrendering today doesn't mean surrendering tomorrow, and tomorrow I can no longer guarantee anything. You know he's right. A living rival is always a live wire. But you also know that the story from that mosque has already spread through every market stall in Konya. The people's reaction is sympathy, not for you. Executing a man who voluntarily stripped himself of power and knelt in a house of God asking for nothing but mercy. What exactly does that cost you? The stability of an empire against the life of a single man. How do you even begin to run those numbers? 5 years later, you're 22. The teenager with the sweaty palms is long gone. You've learned to sweep a dinner table with your peripheral vision and track 7 people's micro-expressions at once, reading the difference between someone actually speaking their mind and someone who rehearsed every word. On the walk over, you've learned to plant a controlled piece of false information and wait for it to travel back to you along its leak route, revealing your informants. You run 3 competing court factions simultaneously, quietly funneling resources to whichever 2 are weaker whenever one starts growing too strong. Kara Mustafa, the man whose moves made your reign possible, was executed 18 months after your coronation. The charge: conspiring with foreign powers. Whether the evidence actually held up, the court was split. Nobody said so openly. His replacement lasted 20 months. The one after that, 14. Average tenure of an Ottoman Grand Vizier, under 2 years. One evening, the one person in your orbit you genuinely trust, your personal eunuch, the old man who has been at your side since you were a child, falls seriously ill, fever. The physician says it's nothing serious, just rest. You sit at his bedside and look at his white hair, and you realize he is the only person in your entire world whose loyalty you are actually certain of. Not because he's noble, not because he's principled, but because he has 0 political stake in anything. He has nothing, and that nothing is the only real thing between you. Whether that's tragic or just deeply ironic, you genuinely can't tell anymore. 15 years into your reign, your firstborn son arrives. You look at this tiny, wrinkled face, and for the first time, you feel a kind of fear that has nothing to do with politics or rivals. It comes from somewhere much deeper. It's about what comes after you. You know exactly what this law will do to him someday. If you die young, if one of your other sons takes the throne, this child you just watched open his eyes for the very first time, gets killed on coronation day. And then you think about Mustafa. kneeling on the floor of that mosque in Konya. In 1603, Sultan Ahmed I made a decision that had never been made before. He refused to kill his brother Mustafa. Instead, he had him confined to a private suite deep inside the palace, compound food, servants, a courtyard garden, musicians on call. Comfortable, sealed, completely cut off from the outside world. No governance, no information, no real life. History recorded this as a compassionate reform. They called it the Cafes, the Golden Cage. But 14 years later, when Mustafa was pulled out of that cage and told, "You are now Sultan," the entire court saw exactly what this system had actually produced. He couldn't process state affairs. He couldn't follow diplomatic negotiations. Eyewitness accounts report that during a formal audience, he stood up mid-ceremony and began wandering around the throne room because he genuinely didn't understand what he was supposed to be doing. He was deposed 3 months later, returned to the cage, pulled out again 2 years after that, deposed again. One of the largest empires in human history had handed its highest office to a man who had been in effective solitary confinement for 14 years. This wasn't his failure. This was the system devouring itself. Kill them, the empire bleeds. Cage them, the empire rots. 200 years, and this system never once found an answer that didn't destroy something irreplaceable. Many years later, deep night, you stand alone at the highest tower of Topkapi Palace. The Bosphorus catches cold light below you. Europe to the left, Asia to the right. 2 continents separated by a channel less than 2 miles wide, and your empire grips both shores, stretching outward in every direction toward the edge of the visible world. You can't remember that Persian poem anymore, not because you forgot it, because you don't let yourself reach for it. Some things, once you let yourself feel them inside these walls, become weaknesses, and weaknesses get people killed. You think back to that morning, the sunlight through the latticed window, the open book, the servant's trembling lips. You think about a pen hovering 1 inch above a decree for a full, silent minute. You think about the message from that mosque in Konya, that impossible question you had to answer without a single right answer. You think about your youngest brother, the one who was barely a year old, the one who grabbed your finger once with a grip that genuinely surprised you. The wind off the Bosphorus is cold tonight, but you can't feel it. This isn't because you became ruthless. It isn't because you became strong. It's because this system spent 50 years precisely re-engineering you into exactly what it needed. Not the Sultan as a person, but the Sultan as a function, as a machine. That law, the legal mandate to kill your own brothers, its real victim list goes much further than your siblings. Its final victim is you, except there's no bowstring for that one, no date on record, no one assigned to write it down. One question before you go. On day 3 of your reign, when Kara Mustafa made his move, did you think, even for a single second, what if none of this had ever happened? Where would I be right now? Drop it in the comments. Was that law the empire's shield, or the knife the empire buried in its own chest from the very beginning? If today's story gave you a mind-bending new perspective on the true price of power, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who complains about the stress of modern life. Join us next time as we possess another suffocating piece of real history.